Welcome back, 21st century youth, to our super chaotic history section. Today, we're hopping into our time machine to travel back to the 15th century. This was an era when people didn't have Google Maps, GPS, or, of course, boba tea. Back then, if you wanted to get rich quick, your best bet was trading spices from Asia. That's right, black pepper and cinnamon were worth their weight in gold. But there was a catch. Overland trade routes were blocked, and the sea route wrapping around Africa was way too long and incredibly dangerous. Right when all of Europe was having a massive headache over a lack of spices to marinate their meat, a character with more audacity than brain cells burst onto the scene. Christopher Columbus. Columbus wasn't a prince or some billionaire CEO. He was just a Genoa-born Italian sailor, full of ambition and equipped with infinite confidence. He wholeheartedly believed in a mind-blowing theory for his time. Hey guys, the Earth is actually round like a ball, not flat like a tray. From that theory, he brainstormed a super clever shortcut. Instead of taking the long way east to Asia, why not sail straight west? Just head west, and we'll eventually run right into India or China. The pitch sounded convincing, but in reality, no one dared try it because they feared sailing too far would cause their ships to fall off the edge of the flat Earth and get swallowed by sea monsters. But Columbus didn't fear monsters, he only feared being broke. So, he packed his bags and set out on his startup fundraising campaign. Columbus's startup project was named Conquering India via Shortcut. His first target angel investor was the King of Portugal. Columbus strutted into the palace with peak confidence and began pitching slide-free, painting a vivid picture of chestfuls of glittering gold and sacks of fragrant black pepper. After listening, the King of Portugal summoned his royal advisors to audit the proposal. The mathematicians of the day shook their heads and said, "My young friend, you calculated the distance all wrong. The Earth is much bigger than you think. Heading that way will only turn you into fish bait." And just like that, his first pitch was an absolute disaster, and Columbus was kicked out. Undeterred, he packed up his slide deck and went knocking on the doors of the kings of England and France, only to receive the same tired headshakes. Everyone thought Columbus was a madman pitching a ghost project to scam the royal courts of their money. Finally, Columbus decided to play his ultimate trump card in Spain, gaining an audience with Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand. At first, the Spanish Scientific Committee rejected his idea outright, calling the plan an absolute insult to the field of geography. But Columbus was no ordinary guy. He possessed a golden tongue, pouring sweet promises into the Queen's ears and planting dreams of spreading religion and seizing massive resources. After nearly 6 years of persistent stalking and persuading, Columbus's stubbornness paid off. Queen Isabella decided to risk it all to show the world what she was made of. She agreed to sponsor the trip, naming Columbus Admiral of the Ocean Sea, and promising him 10% of all profits from any new lands discovered. Columbus finally secured his seed funding to buy ships and recruit a crew. With his newly acquired funding, Columbus bought 3 ships with very catchy names: the Santa Maria, the Pinta, and the Nina. Among them, the Santa Maria was the largest, serving as his flagship. However, recruiting a crew turned out to be a massive headache. Because honestly, who would willingly sign up for a ship heading straight to their doom? To scrape together a crew, the Spanish crown went as far as pardoning several convicts, on the condition that they board the ships with Columbus. So, there we had it, a fleet consisting of a delusional team leader, some clunky old ships, and a bunch of reluctant sailors. On August 3, 1492, the 3 ships officially weighed anchor and departed from the port of Palos, amidst the tearful goodbyes of their families. They made a quick pit stop in the Canary Islands for repairs and restocking before officially slicing through the waves into the deep, blue, uncharted waters. From then on, they were surrounded by nothing but an endless blue of sea and sky. 1 week, then 2 weeks passed without a single whisper of land, making the crew spiral into sheer panic. To keep the peace, Columbus came up with a legendary scam. He kept 2 parallel logbooks. One logged the actual distance traveled for his own eyes, while the other recorded a much shorter distance to convince the sailors they had only gone a little way. But this trick only bought him so much time. By the 5th consecutive week with no land in sight, food was rotting, fresh water was running low, and the crew began huddling in corners, plotting to throw the admiral overboard and turn back. Sensing the extreme tension, Columbus used his ultimate diplomatic skills to negotiate for just 3 more days. The crew agreed, kicking off the most suffocating 3 days of Columbus's life. The first and second days dragged on in dead silence, with only a few strands of seaweed and some wandering birds offering a tiny glimmer of hope. And then came the third and final day. Around 2 a.m. on October 12, 1492, a piercing shout tore through the quiet night from Rodrigo de Triana, a lookout on the Pinta. "Tierra! Tierra! Land! Land, guys!" Everyone sprang up like toasted popcorn, hugging and crying tears of joy because they were going to live. The next morning, Columbus led his men ashore on a beautiful island in what is now the Bahamas, solemnly planting the Spanish flag in the sand to claim sovereignty. But the funniest mix-up in human history started at this exact moment. Because of a broken compass and some seriously botched geographical math, Columbus was absolutely convinced he had reached India. Looking at the tanned native people watching them with curiosity, Columbus nodded smugly to himself. "Ah, these must be Indians." And that is how the indigenous people of the Americas suddenly got dubbed Indians, all because of one massive oopsie by the admiral. Columbus excitedly set off to find the local king to buy pepper and silk, but instead of the grand palaces of Asia, he only found simple thatched roof huts and people wearing clothes made of leaves. Comforting himself with the thought that he was probably just in the suburbs of India, he kept exploring the surrounding areas, discovering the islands of Cuba and Hispaniola. Everywhere he went, Columbus clutched his notebook, hunting down gold and spices. But aside from a few tiny gold nose rings worn by the natives, he found 0 massive gold mines. On the bright side, the expedition discovered strange things Europe had never seen before: tobacco leaves, corn, potatoes, and chili peppers. Columbus decided to hoard all these exotic items along with a few kidnapped natives to bring back as proof of his success. In early 1493, Columbus crammed his crew onto the tiny Niña to cross the ocean back to Spain and report on his startup's results. Back in his homeland, he was welcomed like a god, a true national hero. The king and queen threw a lavish royal banquet in his honor. Columbus confidently presented the monarchs with exotic goods, colorful parrots, potatoes, corn, and even native captives. Although the amount of gold he brought back fell way short of his promises, it was enough to give all of Europe gold fever. Everyone wanted to sail out to strike it rich in the new land. Thanks to the success of his first voyage, Columbus easily raised capital for his next trips. On his second voyage, he led a massive fleet of 17 ships and over 1,200 men, aiming to set up colonies and extract every ounce of gold. But life is no fairy tale, and Columbus's management skills turned out to be inversely proportional to his sailing talents. Appointed governor of the new lands, Columbus ruled as a cruel dictator, forcing the natives to harvest a set amount of gold every month or face brutal physical punishments. Even the Spanish colonists under his command absolutely loathed him for his terrible management, which plunged the colonies into chaos, starvation, and rampant disease. News of this tyranny eventually reached the ears of the royal court. In 1500, the king sent a royal commissioner to investigate. The verdict? Columbus was arrested, thrown in chains, and dragged back to Spain like a common criminal. Although Queen Isabella later pardoned him due to his past services, the admiral's reputation was completely ruined. He managed to pull off a fourth voyage in 1502, but it was a hopeless endeavor. Until his very last breath in 1506, Columbus remained stubbornly convinced he had found a route to Asia, never realizing he had actually set foot on an entirely new continent. Columbus's massive mix-up was finally cleared up by another explorer, Amerigo Vespucci, who proved that this was a completely separate new world. To honor Amerigo, they named this new continent after him, America. Poor Columbus, he did all the heavy lifting, only for someone else to steal the branding. Still, no one can deny that Columbus's voyage changed the map of the world forever, kickstarting the Columbian Exchange, a massive migration of plants, animals, and goods between the two hemispheres. Thanks to Columbus, Europeans finally tasted chocolate, potatoes, tomatoes, and corn. Conversely, horses, cows, sheep, and wheat made their debut in the Americas. But history always has two sides. The arrival of Europeans also brought deadly diseases like smallpox and measles, wiping out millions of indigenous people. A dark, tragic chapter of human history hidden behind the glorious glaze of geographical discoveries. Today, Christopher Columbus remains a highly controversial figure. On one side, he is hailed as a brave explorer who paved the way for the modern world. On the other, he is condemned as the father of colonialism and brutal genocide. No matter how you judge him, we must admit one thing. Columbus's voyage is the ultimate proof that sometimes the biggest mistakes lead to the greatest discoveries. If Columbus hadn't botched his calculations, he probably wouldn't have had the guts to sail out. And without his stubborn, almost slippery determination, world history might have taken a completely different turn. Columbus's story teaches us to keep dreaming and keep taking risks. Who knows? Maybe one day, when you're just trying to walk down the street to grab some boba tea, you'll accidentally stumble upon a shortcut that leads straight to greatness.